I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better.
You're listening to a DM podcast.
Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, adman and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the 5 of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. To show our support for International Women's Day, we've put together this special episode. In it, 5 amazing women, Layne Beachley, Anya Hindmarch, Kate McClymont, Julia Gillard and Mary Chiarella each tell a story prompted by the 5 of My Life challenge. Entertaining and enlightening, these leaders, who have dominated across the varied worlds of sport, fashion, journalism, politics and nursing, serve as an inspiration to us all, whatever your gender. World surfing champion Layne Beachley talks about her film. We're going to start with your film. Now,
yes.
Now, you've chosen the second Austin Powers film, The Spy That Shagged Me.
It's very shagadelic, baby.
The rumour is that they're going to make a 4th one, and it's called For Your Thighs Only. Isn't that great?
That's gold.
So before you tell us why you chose it, tell me what you like about the film, or what you don't like about the film.
Why did I choose The Spy Who Shagged Me? Well, do I make you randy, baby? Do I? I love the humour. I love the characters. And one of my favourite characters in that film was Fat Bastard.
Yep.
And I happened to watch that film, I think, 7 times.
Wow.
To the point where I could recite the film from beginning to end. All the different characters, all the different lines.
Is it Heather Graham?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, Felicity Shagwell.
Yeah.
Shagwell by name, shag very well by reputation, baby.
And then there's someone in it with my maiden name. It's awful. My apologies. My maiden name was Spit. My married name is Swallow or something.
Yeah.
And then he does that look to camera.
Yeah,
baby.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was a whole lot of hilarious moments in that film, and also why I chose it was because I think I was thinking that was the movie that I went on my second date with my husband, but it was the 3rd Austin Powers film that I went on my second date.
Okay.
With my husband, my future husband, but now husband. So this
was 90. This
is 1999.
So you were on your second world,
competing for my second world title, which happened to be my most challenging world title.
And why was that?
Well, as you'll see with a lot of athletes or teams who are attempting to repeat success, there seems to be this insurmountable amount of expectation and pressure on our shoulders, and no one's responsible more than ourselves for when we start to take that on. And I just took that on as being, okay, now I'm number 1 in the world. All of a sudden I have to be twice as good as what I was 6 months ago to repeat that success and deserve that success. I won 6 in a row and then had 2 years where I missed it because for a variety of reasons, 1, great competition, 2, severe injuries, and then came back and won my 7th one in 2006.
Bloody good on you.
I was 34 years old. competing against girls that weren't even born when I started touring.
Good
Disrespectful little things they can do. Yeah.
What part of the world was the second World Championship in?
Well, it's a points accumulation, so I was competing all over the world.
So you add it up over. You can tell I know fuck all about surfing, don't you?
That's obvious. It's rather insulting. I can't believe. You show me these notes. You pretend you've been reading all about me,
surfing.
but not about my career, obviously. So let me fill you in.
Yeah.
I won my first world title in 1998. My second one, 99. Third one, 2000, and on we went. I remember when that first Austin Powers film came out, I didn't quite get it.
Yep.
Because I was very serious, focused, determined athlete.
Sure.
And had the compassion of a tiger shark for myself and others.
Yep.
And so when the second one came out, I got it. Now, I watched the first one a couple of times, went, okay, now I get it. It's actually just satire and it's supposed to be funny. And then when the second one came out, I just loved Fat Bastard and Dr. Evil and Mini-Me and just the way that Mike Myers creates these characters based on his own personal experiences with family it's just hilarious. So I just loved it and fell in love with it, and that's why I had to watch it so often.
It's got a sensational soundtrack as well.
It does, actually.
And it's got in it cameos from really brilliant musical. That's got Elvis Costello and Willie Nelson and Burt Bacharach.
Burt Bacharach, yeah.
So that was in 1999.
Yep.
The book that you've chosen was...
Well, actually, I didn't tell you why I chose the film.
Oh, well then please, crack ahead.
Yeah. Are you sure you're running this program?
Yes. You take over, Lane. It's yours. Do it. Do it.
The reason I chose this film was because it helped me win my second world title.
Tell me more.
Well, as I was saying, that insurmountable amount of pressure and expectation I was experiencing led to me pushing myself too hard, and that resulted in a severe knee injury right in the lead up to the US Open, which is about the fifth event of the year. And I had started to lose my sense of connection with the world title because I was having really inconsistent results, which is ultimately a result of inconsistent mindset and thought processes. And then what happened was I was in free surfing down at Trestles one afternoon, and I did a maneuver that pushed me too far, and I tore my medial ligament in my right knee. And so I was pretty much out for the next couple of events. I was supposed to stay out for 6 weeks. I stayed out for 10 days and then surfed in the US Open. Didn't perform that well, but then went over to the UK.
Yep.
And which you're familiar with. And I went and surfed at a place called Newquay.
Yes.
And
not Fistral Beach.
No, yes, Fistral Beach, and cold and small, standard. And so in between every heat, I would come in and put ice and a TENS machine on my knee, and I'd have my foot elevated, did the whole rice thing, rest, ice, compression, elevation, and just managed to progress my way through heat after heat after heat. And I was surfing with a big carbon kind of knee brace on as well.
Right.
So it was a real challenging time, but it was at the time it was the richest event in the world, and it was offering $20,000 US prize money for first place, which is almost half of what I would earn in a year anyway.
Sure.
So I was going after it, and I also needed this result to propel me back into first place on the tour rankings so I could defend my world title.
Yes.
So I made the final. And I could see, we had been at the beach since 7 o'clock that morning, and the final, due to summer and the sun being high, the final didn't surf till about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 o'clock that night. So we'd been at the beach all day. And I remember walking down to the final, I looked at my competitor and her eyes were bulging out of her head. She was exhausted, as was I. But I also got this hint that she had her eyes on the prize. She had her eyes on getting that money. And so I used the words of Fat Bastard to distract me from thinking about winning, to make sure that I stayed focused on the processes that I needed to follow to perform at my best, because when I perform at my best, I'm going to win. Yeah. And so I remember paddling around on the water, looking at her and just going, "You can keep your money. I want your baby. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back. Ribs, chilies, baby back ribs." And so I just started reciting Fat Bastard to distract me from the fact that I'm competing for a final and a win and 20,000 US, but I want the win. I don't want the prize money.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really healthy distraction to keep me.
That's a sensational story.
I went on and won. And the thing was, in the UK, they actually had to go and raid all the banks to get the cash, to pay me in cash. And they paid me $3,000 in $1 bills. So I had this wad of cash that I ended up traveling through Europe with. I felt loaded. Yeah. And I didn't, I had to just kind of money launder. I had to carry all this cash around with me for several months as I went around the tour. And then ultimately that win gave me the confidence to then change my direction a little bit, work on my equipment a little bit more. And then I ultimately won my second world title in Hawaii later that year.
And Mike Myers would have no idea
no, of course not.
the impact
Fat
he's
bastard
had.
wouldn't have any idea.
Global fashion icon Anya Hindmarch talks about her book.
We're moving from children's fiction to, I mean, I'm loath to call it this, but adult self-help. You have chosen a book written in 1978 by Shakti Gawain, if I've pronounced the lady's name correctly, Creative Visualizations. It's a pioneering classic, sold 7 million copies. Tell me about it and why you've chosen it.
This is a book, and I will confess that I haven't really actually read. It's a book that I love the kind of the spark notes of. It's a book. It's a philosophy ultimately that I really believe in and share with a great friend of mine, Natalie Massenet, who started Net-a-Porter. Who's a brilliant woman, and she and I sort of bonded over this book because the premise ultimately is that if you believe and creatively visualize what you would like to happen. So maybe it's a work ambition, or it's a personal ambition, or it's For me, I used to be very, very, very scared of public speaking,
right.
and so the idea of standing up and doing that was it was unthinkable. I couldn't get through my fear. And someone once taught me that, in fact, if you visualize, if you imagine you're standing on the podium and you're imagining all the faces looking at you and you're seeing it going well, and you visualize what you would like to happen.
Right.
So it takes the fear away, because almost it opens all your neural pathways, and you actually you've kind of almost done it. Actually, is the point. So you've sort of it makes that whole process a lot easier. And I think if you apply that to all sorts of things, so maybe you want to achieve something. So recently we've just bought our business back, for example, and in my dream during that process, what I really wanted to do was, there's a picture behind me on the wall, which is a lovely Margaret Calvert of a sign of women at work. So there's the road sign of men at work, but a women at work one. And my absolute thing was, I'm going to put that back on my wall, and I'm going to take back my business. And so visualizing that actually is much more likely to make it happen. So you're sort of concretely actually saying, these are my ambitions, and therefore you're working very much and very clearly and coherently towards an aim, as opposed to sort of slightly kind of following a windy road. So I do think that if you're quite concrete about saying, I would like to achieve this, not in a sort of a silly way, but in a kind of as a nice sort of good, clear, I think it's possible and I want to do it, is much more likely to happen. So that book is about that premise, and I think it's a good way of thinking, actually, so that makes you very focused on actually what you're trying to achieve.
It's interesting with some of those self-help books, or in that genre, some of them a bit like you needn't feel they're the best book out there, but you can take the message. And some of them you don't need, like this one, you don't need to read the book to get it. So there's one I read ages ago, and it's like feel the fear and do it anyway. And you go, got it. I mean, I don't need to read 300 pages of examples. You're probably going to say, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's not a bad thing to do. That's quite helpful.
I so agree. I think, a lot of them are quite cheesy, frankly, and yet I think you always get one thing from it. It just helps you. And also it's taking time to stop and think. I think it's part of the process as well. There's a book I read ages ago, which was actually about, it's called The 1 Minute Manager, a very famous series of books. And it's the idea of delegation. It's talking about the monkey as the task, if you like, and it's about not having the monkey half on your back and half on someone else's back. So if you give a task, would you be kind enough to do X? Give it to them fully, give them a time frame, and leave them with that monkey, but don't leave half it on your back, so then they can't do the job and you can't let go of it. And very simple things like that. That really helped me when I was starting the business. And so lots of those things. So actually I quite enjoy reading those sorts of books. I mean, grazing them, I will be honest. And I often find, because I think I'm sort of exhausted half the time and busy, that it's quite difficult to sort of sink into a sort of a novel. And somehow I find sort of grazing these books is actually quite a nice way to relax, but without giving too much time. I find I'm so sort of it's hard to wind down and actually really have the time to sort of get sunk into a good book. I do it on holiday. I will move away from self-help, you'll be pleased to know, on holiday.
Have you seen that there's a lady, I was in Texas at the thing called Southwest, and this woman gave this amazing speech that I was lucky enough to be at, but that she's written a book and she's done a TED video. But it's similar to creative visualization, where the body language that a boxer or a sprinter will do if they win, the arms in the air. And this woman, sort of nutty, you go, if you stand in that victory pose before you're about to do something, you present to your investors or the board or whatever, and you quietly in the loo, no one can see you, and you stand like you've just won the Olympic gold medal, and you do that for as little as 10 seconds, and then you walk out in the boardroom, you will be more confident. Now, I do quite a lot of public speaking in my life and blah, 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 to sometimes, 7,000 people or whatever, and that can be mildly petrifying. And so I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to tell anybody, and it's the first time I've ever mentioned it, but I think I'm just going to try that out for a laugh. It's great.
Really?
It works. Yeah. So I'm going to try out I've actually ordered the book. It didn't arrive in time, the creative visualization. So I'll let you know if it's crap or not.
Well, I think in the same way that with my total fear of public speaking, I remember doing something called NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, because someone said, go and see someone who can teach you how to do speeches and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this friend happened to be someone who would coach people doing public speaking. I had to do this big speech. But also, actually, his process was this NLP. And actually, that was fascinating. And so that's the idea of actually your brain. I'm so clever, your brain. You can actually just switch off fear. So you might have fear on a number of things. For me, I used to really sort of hyperventilate. It became a very physical thing, and it was awkward. And they trace it back to why. And for me, I actually wanted to sing professionally. I loved classical music, and I had a very bad experience. And so it really halted me. So they take you back over the experience, and they kind of wash it from your brain effectively, and then they bring you back. And one thing, and so you can approach anything, I think, if you look at things differently. One thing that he taught me, which really helped me, was he said, when you're scared, actually being scared is the same emotion as being excited. And so approach it from a different point of view. And it's good to have that gremlin on your shoulder saying, you're going to screw up, but just actually turn the volume down. He's there to protect you. Turn the volume down and actually just trust yourself a bit more. You've done a few things, it's sort of okay. So there's all sorts of ways to learn and improve. And so whilst they're quite cheesy, I think you grab one thing from each idea.
Australia's leading investigative journalist, Kate McClymont, told us about her song.
Now, we're going to go back in time to the 1960s. You have chosen the song that, according to some people, is the most acclaimed song of all time.
Oh, that makes me feel a bit cheap.
Well, you're such a populist, McClymont.
I know.
It's Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan.
And I have I've always loved Bob Dylan, except I have walked out of a Bob Dylan concert.
How often have you seen him?
I've seen him twice and never again.
Why did you walk out?
Well, when I got 3/4 of the way through him singing Lay Lady Lay, and I suddenly recognised that was the croaky scrawl, he just butchered every song. And I feel sorry for artists, because you think, imagine spending your whole life every night playing the same songs, trying to sing them with passion. But I also read his autobiography, and I found that I really disliked him after I read it.
And why is that?
Because there's a kind of a sneering distance about Bob Dylan. And I think, when he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, couldn't you have at least been just one tiny bit, gee, thanks so much, yes, I'll come along and get it. But no, he couldn't do that. But okay, forget all that. Going back to Like a Rolling Stone, it is just so full of passion and vitriol and, how does it feel? Mm-hmm. And, to be without a home, I just think it's just one of the all-time, great works of, lyrical writing, really. It's just so passionate.
And an interesting sort of theme in terms of from hero to zero. The backdrop of that. And if I can use that to ask you about some of the work that you do, where the people who are flying high, and then how does it feel you're now heading off to clink because you're done, is tell me a bit about sort of the lessons that you've learned from your your work, where you meet these people who, until they've been rumbled, they are flying high, and then you know.
The absolutely worst thing that happened, as far as that goes, was that one of my colleagues and I were writing this, major story about the law firm Keddies and their overcharging of, vulnerable, injured clients. Anyway, so we'd spent weeks and weeks working on this, and about 2 days before the story goes to air, I find out my new next-door neighbour is one of the partners of Keddies.
Ouch.
So we write this story. My new neighbour moves in. As a result of my story, the firm goes down the gurgler. He is bankrupted. He loses his practicing certificate. I think he did get it back again. But sometime later, I was at a friend's child's 21st, and the next door neighbour's daughter was there, and she came up and just said to me, "You ruined our lives. You really ruined our lives." And I said, "Look, I'm really sorry." She said, "You're not sorry." And I said, "Actually, you know what? There are 115 law cases against your father's law firm. I know that this is a hard thing to hear, but sometimes people have to take responsibility for their own actions, and they have to look behind who has delivered or who has exposed them. But it happens a lot is that you personally get the blame for what is really the revelation of somebody else's wrongdoing. And I think the very reason they've been able to do those things in the first place often is, a form of, they're a sociopath or a narcissist, and they sleep really well at night, even though they've destroyed other people. But when the tables are turned on them, they never look into themselves for their own bad behaviour. It's always your fault.
Would you mind talking a little bit about how your work has affected you and your life view, if at all? Has it made you more cynical about the human race, or less cynical, or more hopeful, or?
No, I think that I am a perpetual optimist. I'm always looking that there's always good. It doesn't make me cynical. I just see it as, the wide, just the wide horizon of human nature, and it's populated by some very bad people. So, and I just think that, I sort of feel quite blessed, and sometimes it's a little bit of a burden, but people contact you. I would get at least 5 emails, calls a day from people saying, "Please, can you fix this for me? Please, can you fix, what's happening to my, father in an old people's home? I've been robbed by, cryptocurrency experts. This new bridge is going to completely ruin our community." And I can't do it all. I just can't. And you sort of feel like, I hate letting people down, and I hate saying, "I'm really sorry." But when they're particularly, absolutely crazy or mad, I always say, "Well, try so-and-so at the Daily Telegraph." They'll help you.
I'm interested, Kate. You get all these people who contact you saying, "Could you investigate X, Y, or Z?" How do you filter them out, so the crackpots to the things that actually is worth your valuable focus to investigate more?
Well, for one, anyone who uses indiscriminate use of capitals, underlining or red writing, or
exclamation
quotes,
mark.
Yes, or quotes any biblical reference or any psalm in any way, straight into the bin. Yep. But no, usually you develop a bit of an ear about what sounds provable. The hardest things is when you get the anonymous emails, or people now contact you via encrypted means, Wickr and things like that. And what they are saying is absolutely sensational. But you know that if you're sued, you don't have that source to go back to, because often you need a paper trail, you need something, or you need someone to stand up in court. Every story I do now, I have to think, how am I going to prove this in court, which is such, a terrible situation. But defamation is a really difficult thing that makes our professional lives hard to do. And I'm not saying that people don't have a right to sue if they feel suitably aggrieved. But for us, it's really difficult.
Now, I'm going to flip this on its head, and I'm going to look for the silver lining. Have you ever had a tip-off and thought you were on a hot lead and investigated something, and then found out that the woman or man was actually a saint, and it was all slander, so you investigated and he or she wasn't dodgy?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, in fact, look, that has happened, and often you will find that there is a motivation. There's a motivation. Every single person that contacts you, there is a reason behind it. And often for us, revenge is a fabulous reason because it motivates people to come forward. But they can be totally one-eyed, slightly crazy themselves, and they will give you, I won't go into, who it's happened to because it's unfair to them. But when you look into it, you realise that, in fact, it's your informant that is the one that really, was trying to deflect attention away to possibly the only good person in the story. So, yes, that has happened.
Australia's first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, talks about her special place.
Now, I have to tell you, Miss Gillard, that all your choices have been unique, because you are a unique individual. But your fourth choice has had one other of my guests that's been similar. So Layne Beachley chose the ocean, and Julia Gillard has chosen the seaside. Define the seaside for me and tell me why you've chosen it.
Well, Layne Beachley engages in the ocean in a different way to me.
You look at it.
So I think she would say ocean because she's far offshore hunting the perfect wave so that she can ride it with consummate skill and athleticism. That's not me. And so I've used the more humble expression seaside because really I'm on the sand looking out. I do like to swim in the ocean, but more routinely what I do is I like to walk alongside the water and just feel the air. I'm a big believer that there is something restorative for your soul, for your body, for everything, if you can get some ocean air.
That's the perfect link, Julia, for me to ask you to talk about your Beyond Blue role. You're talking about the restorative effects of a walk by the seaside. You do wonderful work for Beyond Blue. Would you mind just talking a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm the current chair of Beyond Blue. I took that over a few years ago from Jeff Kennett, who, of course, everybody would remember as a Conservative politician, Premier of Victoria. But after his time in politics, he took very seriously mental health. He wanted to make a big difference. Jeff's a very can-do kind of person. And he created Beyond Blue and built it into the organisation it is today. And it's about awareness raising, but also behaviour changing. It's about innovation in services, trying to think up new ways of meeting needs, experimenting with them, then showing what works, and then trying to persuade government to bring it to scale. But most people would know Beyond Blue because they or a family member have reached out and used our services as a mental health support. So they might have rung the telephone line, and certainly in their hundreds of thousands, Australians are now contacting the Coronavirus Wellbeing Support Line. Or they may have engaged online through the website, been in a chat room, got some resources that they needed. And so it's all a way of saying we can never address mental health needs unless we're prepared to talk about them and encourage people to reach out for help when they need it. And in this pressurised time, we would all expect, and it's completely understandable, that more people need support than in a more usual cycle in Australia.
Yeah, wonderful organisation.
We're moving on to the fifth and last choice, which is typically my favourite one, because it's where people get more personal. I think you have as well. You have chosen a photograph of your father. Would you mind describing it for us and then telling us why you've chosen it?
Sure. I've got many photos, of course, of my father and mother, but this photo is one of Dad kind of caught not unawares. He has obviously had someone call out to him and the photograph's been snapped, but he is at the kitchen sink. He's washing dishes. He's got a tea towel just draped over his shoulder. And it says a lot to me about him as a man, because that's who he was. It says a lot to me about now I do so much work on gender stereotypes. It says a lot to me about men who don't live confined by those stereotypes. And it says a lot to me about life being about the small moments, not necessarily the grand occasions.
I think that's a wonderful possession to have chosen. There's a phrase, if you're going to be it, you need to see it. And the story, actually, Richard Glover was telling me about the Indian girls, and the outcomes are different when they see other female leaders. So like you seeing your dad actually doing washing up that might be in a different environment considered as a gender non-appropriate, whatever else. Well, it's not gender inappropriate if you see your dad doing it. So it's just modelling the right behaviour. And on the small things, for me, I worry that our media doesn't have the capacity to have balance and perspective and celebrate the victories. And I love the way earlier when you were talking about how far we've come. It is possible to acknowledge two things at the same time. There is lots to do. There will always be lots to do. But let's look back at the life of people in the 1300s, the 1600s, the 1800s. We've come a long way. So I think it's a really lovely message about the small things, because in reality, not many of us can be, JFK or Winston Churchill or Ellen Johnson Sirleaf or Julia Gillard. We're just sort of doing the best we can, putting one foot in front of the other. And you've been a legend, Julia, to come on Five of My Life and be so honest and open and authentic.
Thank you.
Inspirational nursing leader Mary Chiarella discusses her possession. Your possession is your home in Sydney. So
yes.
First of all, describe where it is, what it is, and then tell us why you've chosen that.
It's in Mossman. Sounds terribly grand until my father-in-law bought it for us. He said it was the worst house in the best suburb. And it was a tiny 2-bedroom cottage. But my first late husband, I'm widowed twice, as you know, but my first late husband was an architect.
Yeah.
So basically he built the place from scratch. Then he got a job. So he stopped building it.
Right.
And so we lived in this half-built house forever, with no architraves, holes between the ceiling and the roof, the walls and the roof, rather, nothing on the walls, no cupboard doors. My friends would come and go, oh my God, I've got cupboard doors. and we go to the openings of buildings that Laurie had designed, and people go, oh my God, he's so talented. And I go, yes. and I'd say to him, put the doors on the cupboard or else I'll invite them home. But it was just a place of absolute joy. And it didn't matter, truly, that there weren't any doors on the cupboards. It was just the happiest, most wondrous place. It was, for me, it was like my home, my Jarman, where I grew up, because it was always full of people. And Lorenz was just wonderful. Like, he was loud and noisy and ebullient, and he just took life with both hands. And I was always really glad to slipstream him, but I love being in my home. And so I loved entertaining. He came from a big entertaining family, so did I. So the Italian and the north of England actually gelled very well. It was just always full. The kids came, they brought their friends. It was always just this wondrous place. And then suddenly when Laurie died, he died very suddenly. He had a heart attack and crashed our car. It was a terrible, terrible shock to all of us. It was sort of around the time of the global financial crisis. They had some financial difficulties at the time. And people started suing me because I was sole executrix of our estate, or his estate.
So you're grieving and you're being
sued 2 weeks after the first piece of litigation came through. And I thought I might lose the house. I didn't. I just thought I couldn't bear it, because before he died, he knew there was financial difficulties, and he'd said, look, we might lose the house. And I'd say, well, it doesn't matter because we've got each other.
Right.
It doesn't matter where we are. And then suddenly when I didn't have him, It mattered enormously. I managed to save it, mainly through the way that we'd set up the ownership of the house. It came directly to me. It wasn't like half and half. So that was a great relief. And I couldn't remember how we'd set it up, by the way. And I certainly didn't have the wherewithal at that time. You know, I was absolutely broken. And so were my kids. So they were my most important thing. You know, their dad had gone. So we got the house. We still had to go through all the litigation. And then I met Martin, who was my second husband. And when he came to my house, he said, oh my God, he'd grown up in Rhodesia. His father was a professor of law at Salisbury and his mother was a journalist. And they had this home called Tandara. And he said, my God, your house is just like Tandara. It's full of fascinating people who sit round and they don't care what they eat and drink as long as they can talk. You know, that was how he saw it. So he lived there for the whole of his life. And basically 6 months after we'd met, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, stage 4. And so we only had 2.5 years together. And he very much wanted to get married, which we did eventually because Martin wanted it very much. And so we only had a year being married together.
Right.
Again, you know, it's a bit like people who are in palliative care. It was joyous. It was a really special time. And because we knew...
Because you knew it was limited.
We knew it was limited. We didn't waste a nanosecond. And also one of the things after... Because I had cancer when I was 49 and Laurie didn't die until I was 54. And so again, those last 6 years with Lorenz were so critical because we thought I might die.
Right.
You know, so again, that kind of focus on what really matters and what is wondrous. You know, we had that and it was wonderful. So my home now, like it's full of wonderful memories.
Yeah, you're still in the same place?
I'm still in the same home.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I walk in, first after Lorenz died, it felt like I was a pea in a bucket, you know. I felt I'd rattled around it. But I've reorganised it and I finished the cupboards and the kitchen and the walls, by the way, over the years. And Martin was very handy. So lots of the jobs that Lorenz would never have done, Martin did. But it feels like I've been wrapped in a warm blanket when I walk into it. It is just this place of joy.
It's really inspiring to hear you talk. I mean, that is on one obvious level a very tragic story, but you're talking, you know, incredibly joyously about it.
And I was listening today, again, I listened this morning to Monica McInerney, and she made the comment that her life was forged with love and grief. And so is mine.
Yeah.
That is, I think, one of the things that makes you live every minute. And I see myself as blessed because I've been loved by two extraordinary, well, no, more than two, my dad, my brothers, you know, my sons, by lots of wonderful human beings and my girlfriends. Oh my God. So I have the best women friends on earth. The day that Laurie died, we came back from the hospital because we had to go and identify him. We came back from the hospital and 4 of my women friends were sitting on my front doorstep. And they just walked in and they started cleaning my cupboards, which I suspect they'd wanted to do forever, by the way. But they just never left. Those first 2 weeks, I was never on my own. We were never on our own. And so I am, you know, I see myself not as a figure of pity, but as someone who has been incredibly blessed. We can't avoid grief. We can't avoid tragedy. You don't know who it's going to hit and you don't know when it's going to hit. So the important thing is to live the best life you can, isn't it? And my dad, who was an extraordinary man, he was like the local magistrate and the local rural chair of the rural district council, chair of the housing committee, you name it, Dad did it, you know. He wrote in my autograph book when I was 5 a quote, which is, "I shall pass through this world but once. Any good thing that I can do, let me now do it. Let me not defer it nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." And then underneath it he wrote, "This is how I've lived my life, Mary. I hope you will live yours in the same way."
That is the most perfect end story and quote for 5 of my life. That's just such a lovely... You're only here once. I hope to live, you know, my life the best way I can. Wonderful. Mary, there is one further question.
Yes.
That you will know, because I know you've listened to lots of the other episodes, is who would you like to hear on 5 of My Life next?
Like Monica, I'm going to be very parochial and say that this is a friend of mine. And she is a friend of mine called Amanda Adrian.
Amanda Adrian.
Yes. She is a nurse and a lawyer like I am.
Okay.
And she has had an incredibly checkered career. She's now retired, and as a retired nurse and lawyer, she has actually become a painter. She's a very good artist. She's just had some exhibitions in Canberra. She also is, like me, a passionate conservationist. So we're both hugely interested in environmental issues in relation to health. And she is also the president of the local rural district fire service.
Wow.
So she is a dynamo. And it won't matter which bit of her life you look at, you'll be fascinated.
Well, I look forward to hearing her stories on Five My Life, and I'm going to end with a quote from Florence Nightingale that you have at the base of your emails.
Yes.
Which is, let us never consider ourselves finished nurses. We must be learning all our lives. Wise words, Mary. Thank you so much for sharing on Five My Life.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you follow Five of My Life, you might enjoy my latest book, Smart, Stupid and 60. In it, I write about a number of the issues discussed on the show. It's the 20-year follow-on from my first book, Fat, 40 and Fired. If you have any feedback on the book or suggestions for the show, please get in touch via my website, nigelmarsh.com.